I went down to my local JC recently. I like taking classes at community colleges, usually on weekends for a bunch of reasons. For one, I like to learn. I like places like libraries and bookstores where you can find a lot of information here. But learning in a classroom setting does have its advantages. For one, you're surrounded by like-minded people who like to learn things. Two, you can ask questions and create conversations about stimulating topics that you can't really get from online tutorials or books. I find that when you go places that have a lot of people who are interested in learning, you can meet interesting people. That's the main reason. So I was sitting in the middle of campus. I had a schedule and I was just kind of leafing through it when this elderly woman came and sat down. I assumed she sat next to me because the place was so crowded. She didn't seem like a student. She wasn't giving off that student vibe of being excited to start a new semester and learn a bunch of stuff. She had the relaxed, been there, done that vibe of a professor. I asked her what she taught, and she said she taught a lot of classes in psychology. I asked her how long she had done that for, wondering if maybe she used to be in private industry, and she said she was semi-retired but still liked to teach. I asked if she'd always taught there, and she smiled and said she used to teach at a very prestigious Ivy League university and that she just finished her life's work. She said she finished it 3 years ago, but she still had that kind of bittersweet feeling of having finished it and being glad and proud, but still kind of sad that it was over. I asked what it was about and she told me. She said she was originally interested in getting into clinical psychology, mainly so she could help people, but she quickly ran into a problem that patients would take a long time feeling comfortable to open up. She wanted to get to the heart of their issues much more quickly. That was the motivation behind much of her theoretical research, which she did for the next several decades. Her theory was that there was a connection between internal state and external behavior, not just a vague connection, but a very specific and scientifically measurable connection. Many people learn to read people, but this is done through a lot of subconscious trial and error. Her theory and her goal was to come up with a very specific correlation between external behavior and internal thinking. The hardest part was coming up with an experiment to do that. Scientists and marketers have known for a long time that in order to get accurate data, you have to be very careful about how you set up the experiment. Often the best experiments are based on misdirection. For example, if you are a company that makes different kinds of chip dip, you can't just ask people which dip they like the most. You have to kind of trick them. For example, you tell them the marketing study was on watching a bunch of different commercials and then answering a bunch of questions. In the back of the room would be several different kinds of dip with one kind of chip. Then you'd simply see which dip flavor they preferred while being completely natural. Of course, you'd have to repeat the experiment with different kinds of chip and dip combinations. This is the kind of study you need to set up when doing a lot of psychological experiments. But she did get a lot of grant money from government agencies for obvious reasons. If she could come up with a specific matrix that would map external body language and facial expressions to internal thought processes, it would be a boon to law enforcement. Eventually, she did come up with a very specific matrix. She said it's complicated. You need to have a very powerful processor and a high-resolution video imaging, but it's definitely possible. I asked her if she was worried about the government abusing this kind of power, and she said she wasn't. It turns out that the government, other than certain law enforcement agencies, are not really that interested in this technology. They would be more interested in the reverse process of not being able to accurately read people's thoughts, but instead being able to implant certain thoughts. She said as far as she knows, that is still a long ways off, but what she is worried about within the next 10 years or so when technology catches up with the intentions of corporate marketing executives is very specific targeting. For example, with plenty of high-resolution cameras put in everywhere, all connected to supercomputers running her algorithm, they will be able to literally read the specific thoughts of everybody. And since they'll know their exact location and will have specific targeting capabilities, they'll be able to match their current thought processes to highly targeted advertising. Some guy will pass by a cute girl and start thinking sexual thoughts, and suddenly they'll get a bunch of pop-up ads on their phone for the nearest strip club. Somebody will be thinking of a hamburger and suddenly they'll get pop-up ads for the nearest hamburger shops. The possibilities are endless. Of course, when she wasn't even halfway through her research, she knew this was coming, so she published all her findings in plenty of different books under different names. She said that if you can find these books and read these books and study these books, You'll learn all about how to read people's minds by being able to interpret body language. Of course, you never meet people like this at your corner bar. People that tend to hang out together just to pass the time tend to be in a much different mood. To really meet interesting people, people that enjoy being able to have conversations, you've got to go places where people go there specifically to learn new things. And going to your local junior college is a perfect place for that.